Thank you for joining us for the opening plenary of the industry strategy meeting. I am very excited to be here this morning with these four awesome panelists. I think that you will really appreciate the perspectives that they're going to bring. I am joined by Lori Fries of Wal-Mart, Aireen Omar of AirAsia, VanDevender of the Founders Fund, and Amy Webb of the Future Today Institute. And we will be having a conversation that I'm hopeful that I'm going to be able to step back from as the moderator, and they're just going to get into this. But, you know, we could talk a lot about everything that's going on in the world, because there's certainly a lot going on. And as we think about the industry agendas, I think every single one of you here worries about all of that every day. But for today and tomorrow, we're going to step back from what we worry about and think about how do we get to the place where we improve the do-to-talk ratio. How do we understand a little bit more about what are we doing with these trends? Where are they real? Where are they happening? How do we think about where the weak signals in one industry might be really important to you in another industry? The person next to you may be experiencing the way some of the technology is impacting their business, and they may be doing something about it that you should be learning about and talking about. And so our entire structure of this is to help you think about things in industry verticals and then these cross-learning opportunities. And so I'd urge you, as we're in these sessions here, to really engage in this conversation, right? You will get as much out of this as you can put into it. And we're going to kick it off, though, and really start to talk about, you know, what are the trends, what's going on, what are we seeing with business models, and how do we move some of this forward. So, Lori, let's start with you. From Walmart's perspective, certainly been very active with embracing fourth industrial revolution technologies into your strategy. You know, what are your first thoughts about how to share that with some of the folks here?
Sure. I mean, if you think about retail, I don't think that the level of disruption has been as great or at pace as it is right now. And from a strategy perspective, in terms of how do you capture growth, we have the same questions around where to invest, how much to invest in your core business versus how much to invest in new business areas or new business models, how much to disrupt your core versus disrupt in other areas. But it's really a change in how. Yeah. And Walmart, for history, has always been of the model of we have to build it in order for it to work and work within our system. And I think given the pace of change, it is impossible for us to build everything. And so in the last 2 years, the change has been more around the how in terms of the level of acquisition. Mm-hmm. So disrupting ourselves and buying Jet.com, buying other e-commerce players, because when you look at where retail is growing, overall it's not growing, you know, much faster than GDP around the world, but within it, the format of e-commerce versus physical is a big change. And so M&A has become much more central as a way to drive pace. The second thing is strategic partnerships, recognizing when the capabilities that you have, whether in your core business, but more importantly in new areas, where you have something to give and combine with someone else, and together you can actually create something quite powerful and disruptive in a new place. It actually allows you to move faster than trying to build new capabilities and is less expensive than buying. And so I think that's another area that we've actually done significant, if you look at China, supply chain, and in healthcare. And then the last thing is, how do you take a company as big as Walmart that has been in business as long as Walmart and actually create a more entrepreneurial culture? And so we recently stood up something called Store Number 8, which is a way for us almost to have a captive VC fund investing in entrepreneurs in technologies or businesses that we think have scalable impact and will disrupt us. And instead of doing it at arm's length, doing it within the company, but setting it up as if it was a standalone startup and incubation. And these are things that even 5 years ago would have never been contemplated, but the pace of change requires it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it sounds like it's exciting times at Walmart, and, but if we shift to AirAsia, I mean, it's certainly been, from a digital marketing strategy, a hallmark, globally recognized hallmark of AirAsia. and certainly part of the growth strategy for the company. Maybe speak a little bit about how you've thought about that and what you see as the strengths of that part of your strategy.
Sure. Just a little bit about how we grew, because we started as a low-cost carrier in 2001. And the model of a low-cost carrier is unheard of in Southeast Asia. And to be able to book through the internet your travels and all that is also something that was very new to Southeast Asia as well. So we built the business. We look at the whole region as opposed to just starting off growth in Malaysia only, because you're looking at the Southeast Asia region of a population base of over 600 million, where around 50% of those are middle income, and that's the highest growth of middle income in the world, really, is from Southeast Asia. And the median age of 28 years old or 29, it's a very young age group. And the fact that Southeast Asia is surrounded by water and the alternative to transportation to air travel is almost non-existent for some countries. So you see a growth of low-cost carriers in the past year. And recently, about 60% of air travel capacity in that region is due to low-cost carriers' growth. And I think as the fact that we are the first mover advantage in terms of how we capture low-cost model and how we actually capture air travel through the internet and all that, we own 80% of the data. Bookings through AirAsia.com is 80%, and the rest are mostly through the traditional way of travel agents and all that, offline also. And we work really hard to protect this because it's really our asset. And what we realized in the past is that we haven't really used this data effectively. And in the past 2 years, we have been working a lot in cleaning up the data. And we feel that, by analyzing the consumer's behavior on the website, there's a lot of value that we can gain. And what we have seen is that we are able to offer more customized and personalized solutions for them. And what we have seen is that by being able to use this data, even though currently we're only using about maybe 10% of it, because we're still cleaning it up, the internet conversion rate has actually doubled from 4% to 8%. So if you can imagine, if we can use almost 50% of the data and what the possibility could be. But using the data is not just about analyzing the trends and behavior of our consumer, but also it helps us in a way to be more efficient in terms of our own operations. The data, not only from the website that we capture, but also from the information we capture from the aircraft itself, the movements of the aircraft, the way the pilots use the aircraft, the way the cabin crew even use the oven. We're able to detect what are the inefficiencies there, what the operational efficiencies can be promoted in the sense that we reduce the aircraft ground time, we reduce the delays, we find ways to automate ways in order to facilitate the huge transaction of volume that we see every day. And the transaction of volume is going to increase as we grow. And how do we use this data also to provide not only just seamless travel for our passengers, but also in terms of improvements of efficiency, and also reduce the cost, because cost is really key in order for us to continue to be a low-cost carrier, in order for us to be able to use, to be able to offer affordable fares and be sustainable in our business. So this is something that we're embracing. We're even looking at the point of how can we use artificial intelligence also to replace certain functions in ground operations, such as guest services that you find in the counter check-in. Is there a way for us to use this to help, especially in terms of managing groups of passengers primarily coming from China or so, as they're primarily, they use Mandarin as their form of communication and all that. So there are many ideas that we're embracing to the point that we're having an innovation hub in our own company where we encourage ideas to come in, where we open up the mindset of our staff to start thinking about the future in this manner as opposed to the traditional way of working as an airline staff, really. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Well, we'll come back to what it means for cultural change in organizations, because I think you both pointed to that being a critical piece. But Aireen, if we jump to you, you've certainly, the firm has had a history with the investments in Facebook, Oculus. It's something you guys spend a lot of time looking at what's going to be the next business, what's going to be the thing that either Wal-Mart wants to buy or they're going to be disrupted by, right? What's going to be the next one in? What do you see today as the key, next great thing?
Well, it's always a difficult question to ask because usually the next great thing is an outlier. If you identify a trend, then there's probably sort of consensus folks jumping into it. And the thing that really breaks the curve is something that comes out of left field. And it's hard to predict exactly what those things that are going to be. But we do find some heuristics about them. One is that we look for things for which the extrinsic piece is well understood. So if you have a seed innovation, how to distribute that to the world is a sort of already solved problem. You know that if you can create the first thing, then making it valuable on a global scale is sort of done. The way that this has really worked out well before is with software, since it's very expensive to make the first copy, but each additional copy is free. That as a platform has gotten even more faster with the internet and cloud technologies that you can scale software as a service very quickly. But we see some other things that are providing that sort of very low-cost scalability, low-cost extent. And in other areas besides software, like in biotechnology, inventing the first molecule for a new therapeutic is very expensive, but generally copying it is very cheap. So we're really interested in those types of things also. Going forward, we haven't seen as much innovation in sort of more heavy physical goods, but we are hopeful that that is starting to change. With logistics providers becoming so efficient and so cost competitive through automated technologies like self-driving cars, through folks like AirAsia making the distribution of people, transportation of people very cost effective. And we see that as enabling new business models where once you get the intrinsic piece, the sort of seed innovation correct, then you can distribute and scale that into the globe very quickly.
Mm-hmm. So, Amy, if we bring in your perspective, in the 2017 Tech Trends Report, you certainly identify a lot of areas that the various industry sectors should be concerned about, and many of them are at crossover points where various trends are starting to come together and start to accelerate. What would be some key things that you would bring up in this conversation this morning?
Sure. So this was the 10th anniversary of the Institute's annual report on technology, trends. And I just want to, trend is a word that gets thrown around a lot. From our vantage point, the types of trends that we look at are not trendy, and they don't compress well into two-word cool phrases, and they're all derived from pretty significant qualitative and quantitative analysis. So with that being said, I think that everybody understands the key trends that are affecting their industries as it relates to technology. Automation is on everybody's minds, machine learning, object recognition, cognitive linguistics to some extent. But for you, it's not as important what's happening directly within the confines of your industry, because I actually believe that it's possible to scout those outliers in advance. But the way to do that is to look outside of your industry at adjacent industries and movements of trends in areas that touch upon your own. And I'll give you an example of that. So a car company, a major car manufacturer, came to us and wanted us to, work with them to figure out what's the future of cars. And this is a company that uses the word mobility a lot. And I thought that was an interesting question. Now, obviously, their motivation comes from needing to understand how do we keep making money, since cars are the things that we create. But their strategy team, we advise them to instead ask the question, what's the future of moving people, objects, and pets around? Once you redefine and it's a simple, it's a very simple thing it's a simple takeaway that every one of you in this room can take back to your offices. If you redefine those questions about the future as you're thinking about trends and especially with technology, suddenly you have an entirely different perspective on things that you should be looking at. So with regards to that, moving people around, we recommended strongly into looking beyond basic artificial intelligence and automation and into things like different segments of the population, especially within Japan, where some of the best collaborative robotics research, I think, is being done on the planet. We can, car companies can learn a lot from robotics that are being built to take care of populations that are aging, because that informs how older people will need to move around, and that presents a new business opportunity for them. But it also presents some challenges if they're not, there to meet it. There are lots of different specifics and opportunities for every field, but I think the most important thing to bear in mind is that you cannot possibly understand the future of your own industry without looking at adjacent industries and second, third, and fourth iterations of existing technologies and the trends that they bear.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's such an important perspective. And it is something, I guess, Lori, as you guys looked at setting up Store 8 and some of these pieces, you considered who do you bring in to actually work on those things? And then as you're bringing those people in, how do they interact and intersect with everyone else? Maybe talk about some of that dynamic, because that's also, if you can get the right questions and you and the strategy and the C-suite have convinced yourself this is the right thing, but very large organizations, that's not enough.
Yeah, I mean, you have a $486 billion company, and you're trying to start up something that's not going to make a difference in the short term, it will get squashed. But you want it to leverage all of the assets and capabilities that you have. So by setting up something separate, giving it the infrastructure support, but keeping it independent, sort of designed for speed and to get the talent is so critical. And we're at the very beginning of it, and people are excited by it, but will it be successful? We don't know, but we've got to keep trying different things. And I think that's the piece of you constantly have to be evolving how you do it. Because there's no other option.
Yeah, there is no way to go forward. At AirAsia, when you're thinking about bringing in these new technologies, new ideas, thinking about how to move people, things, and pets, I think that's a very interesting aspect of between pet photos and moving pets, I guess. Maybe that's the business of the future. But at AirAsia, how did you bring in the mentality of try, learn, and then decide what to do next?
Right.
And I refuse to use the word fail, because we're going to take fail. Well, but failure is not that something didn't work.
Right.
Failure is when you keep doing it when you know it doesn't work, right? And so we have to change the language of failure, right? The language of learning, and how do you get that into your culture? But certainly, AirAsia, you've really done that well.
Well, if I can explain how our business works, we have actually 3 pillars of business in our company. And I do agree with Amy in the sense that you have to go outside the industry to find new ideas, to find ways to always be ahead of the game. The first pillar of the business is naturally our core business, which is the seats business. That's where we sell seats, our scheduled commercial airline, whereby basically we just grow by adding new routes, by adding new frequencies, by strengthening the hubs that we have, by introducing new destinations into the network that we have, by expanding our footprints, because in Southeast Asia, we need to have joint ventures in various countries to be able to do so, to set up AirAsia Malaysia, AirAsia Thailand, India, Indonesia, and so forth, because of this limitation of equity ownership that they have for aviation industry. Then the second pillar of business is ancillary income. What we realize is that we carry on average, 60 million passengers per year. Last year itself, we carried more than 62 million passengers as a whole group. The unique visitors into our website is more than 30 million per month or so. It's a huge audience in itself. And we feel that we lose the opportunity by not cross-selling a lot of things. At one point, we aim to be Wal-Mart in the skies, where we sell a lot of things on board, where we want to position ourselves as a fast consumer goods, as opposed to just a traditional airline company, really. And this is where we start cross-selling things, well, of course, like food, beverages, seats. We are also looking at how we take advantage of the Wi-Fi that we install on plane. What we want to do is not just to encourage people to chat or to earn something from the Wi-Fi fee, but the whole idea is to analyze the trend and behavior of our passengers on board. What is it that they search? What is it that they like to purchase? And at some point in the future, we want to create a marketplace like Amazon, in the sense that the whole guests, the passengers that we have actually attracted, or the community that we have created, they will be actually do a lot of shopping, because Asians love shopping. As soon as they step into the plane, they will continue to shop. They will shop from the moment they enter the airport to the point they reach a destination, even after they get home also. So this is something that we want to create, especially with the boom of e-commerce as well. So at every point of our business, we want to see how best it is to optimize the revenue. Even within the 25 minutes turnaround time, we find a way to how do we increase revenue on that 25 minutes turnaround time? Do we add in cargo? Do we add in courier services? And all this comes into play, and we can earn better revenue if we can use the data that we have, or we can, how we embrace the digitalization in order to improve that sort of thing. Then the third pillar of business is our adjacency business. This is what we feel can create further value for the company, and if we monetize it at some point in the future, because we don't really need to own 100% of it. Of course, initially we probably would own 100% of it, but once we have created that value and we monetize it in the future, it can provide an income stream for our shareholders, like a special dividends every few years when we monetize it. And this adjacency business, we will partner with industries who are of a certain expertise, where they leverage on our data, or they leverage on our technology, or whatever that we have strength in, and they have a certain special skill sets, where we create a different area that will complement our core business. And this is something like the Wi-Fi that I mentioned to you, where we created Rocky Wi-Fi, or even our leasing house, or loyalty points or so. Recently we started this company called Touristly, where it's supposed to be like a visual, it's like a visual trip advisor in a way. So we have a lot of followers. We have created a community where we can create further value out of it. And by having adjacency businesses and partnering with other industry players which have a certain special skill sets, we feel this is one way for us to grow the business continuously and create further value. Right. Yeah, I hope I answer your question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah. Well, certainly you've both touched on the idea of strategic partnerships and really getting creative about who you partner with. And I think this speaks to the whole idea of let's reinvent innovation and how we do it and with whom we do that. And I know both Aireen and Amy, you guys have acted on and have talked about the changing dynamic of innovation, who's funding it, how they're coming together. And so maybe between the two of you, maybe comment a little bit about what you see as the changing face of innovation, idea generation, and funding.
I think for most of the 20th century, the big funding came from the government. There was the success of the Manhattan Project created a lot of confidence in the idea that government could drive a lot of innovation, and so things like the National Institutes of Health and DARPA and the National Science Foundation came out of that confidence and the success of that as a scientific enterprise. And we bore a lot of fruits from that. I still think that there's a big place for that. What we have started to see more frequently is funding sources that are coming from industry, and they tend to be these very high cash generating monopoly businesses that pour a lot of resources into disrupting themselves. Yeah. To take the example from Wal-Mart, and it's sort of hit and miss. And I think on the success of that, there have been a lot of cases where the self-disruption was delivered upon or was created, but somebody else captured the value. Probably the best example of this is Kodak. They invented digital cameras. They had all the patents on digital imaging. Their executive leadership team knew that this was going to be the way of the future, and that the photochemical business was a thing of the past. But because they weren't able to change the culture in time, they lost out on the whole new industry of digital imaging. And now we think that, every year we produce more digital images than more images than all the years previously. So if you think just 1 year of smartphones is more images than Kodak produced in 130 years of their existence. And so it's not enough just to feed into that and nurture it. You also have to be willing to make the cultural sacrifices to enact it. There's lots of examples from Xerox PARC where they thought, okay, we're in the paper business. This probably is not going to last forever. Seems reasonable that things are going to go digital. Very forward thinking. They developed the Palo Alto Research Center and invented graphical user interfaces and laser printers and the mouse. But it wasn't them that actually took advantage of that. It was Apple and Microsoft and the other computer companies in the Valley. And so I think the question is not so much where is the money going to come from. When existing industries create lots of money, they will find opportunities. I think the real question is who's going to actually capture the value of those new industries.
So you said something that really resonated with me, which was fail fast is, why are we using the word fail? And I do think that fail fast, as humans, our brains want to use as little energy as possible. And so regardless of the language we speak, we are attracted to catchphrases. So let me propose a different catchphrase for you that I just thought of. Instead of failing fast, I think iterate intelligently is something to think about going forward. The companies that we work with that do the best job of keeping pace with technology and being proactive rather than struggling under duress to be reactive are companies with strategy officers and teams that don't meet once a quarter or a few times a year and have a big presentation and there's a big paper and some Excel spreadsheets that nobody looks at. These are companies that are organized internally to continually think about the future. And as a result of that, they are continually in iteration mode. I think, and I think it's possible to do this even if you're within a behemoth. So IBM is a good example of this. IBM has had a down quarter, and they've struggled just like every other company has struggled. But this is a company that's been around for more than 100 years. And one of the things that impresses me is how the Watson, on the research side of the organization, that Watson team is thinking, several steps ahead. And they've been pretty nimble in thinking through, the future opportunities that their work might have, and they've been good at finding commercial applications of that. One area, one trend that will affect everybody, that I see very few organizations putting any resources or time or effort into, has to do with the killer technology platform of the 21st century, and it's something that every single person in this room already owns. Can I ask if anybody wants to guess what that killer technology platform is? Shout it out. It's your voice. Okay, your voice is the killer technology platform of our modern era, and that's because within a very short amount of time, our modeling shows 5 years. In industrialized nations, more than half of the interactions that you will have with machines will be with your voice, which tells us a lot about how organizations need to start remapping some of their processes, where they're making investments, even how they're organized internally. It tells us a lot about what should be happening now. And I see very, very few organizations that are doing any substantive research or thinking into how people talking to machines will affect how they operate internally, how they interface with their customers, and how they work with the other businesses within their ecosystem.
Absolutely. Laura, you were nodding a lot during that. There's obviously resonating with things that we need to think about. Your thoughts?
I think I had two reactions. One is it's really easy to go chase shiny objects, though. And you've got to figure out what are the technologies that you're going to lean into because you need to own, because they're so core to what you're doing, and which ones you actually do need to partner. And is there been enough progress where it's clear there's a winner that you want to back, or do you actually have to partner with several? And so it's an amazing time where you have, in our space, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, machine learning, virtual reality that are going to completely change the way people shop, whether they even go to a retail store, how they pick products, how they do everything. And the question is, which ones do you lean into and own? Which one, you have to know how they're going to affect your business, but you have to know which ones you need to have the capabilities in because it's essential for your business model going forward. And I think that's
well, so that's critical. Where, yeah, and the problem is, so when you mentioned virtual reality, I understand what you're saying, but it also made me feel like, oh no, they should be looking at mixed reality, because by the time that large organizations get to a point where they're able to make that investment, usually the rest of the ecosystem is moved forward. I find it fascinating that everybody is so taken with VR.
It just depends on the application.
Right,
I agree
right.
with you. I agree with you.
But there is a way to sort of figure that out. Shiny object syndrome it afflicts everybody. It's a sickness that we all have to get through. But there is a way around it, and it has to do with really methodically. We have tools and formulas that we use, but it's about doing that methodical analysis on an ongoing basis, and that just takes some discipline, and it takes a different kind of strategic thinking. But it's something anybody can do.
The only other thing I was reacting to, and it was mentioned earlier. This digital revolution is not just affecting the way you intersect with the customers, but it's also affecting your workforce. Yeah. And Wal-Mart is in a sort of the blessed and the cursed around. We have 2.4 million associates worldwide and 1.4 in the U.S. And so as we think about how our workforce has to change, you think about 1.3 million plus in our stores. We're going to have fewer of them, but the skills that they have to be will be so different because the technology and what the customers are requiring is going to be so different than what it is today. And I think part of it is thinking about how do you develop in mass the capabilities required, the skill sets required, because universities are not changing fast enough. And this is where public-private partnerships and industries coming together have to work together, because the workforce is not going to change fast enough. Technology is going to outpace the ability to change the workforce, and it's a very challenging struggle to figure out how do I develop 1 million people for a business model that is yet to be delivered today, but if I wait, it's too late. It's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. Aireen just smiled on that one, like, okay.
Yeah,
so what are we missing that we can get there in time?
I think that actually, I sort of disagree about the universities not being able to keep pace or even really being responsible for this. I think that actually the people are fairly adaptable. The thing that is really hard is getting the organizational structures to adapt. Like, the reason why no one reads the strategy team's reports and spreadsheets is because what those reports say is, this is what we should be doing. But the interpretation of that is, we have the wrong organization to do this. And so it's too painful to actually change the structure of the organization to do the thing that everyone knows we're supposed to do. So we're just going to ignore that and keep doing the thing that we've been doing until we slowly sink. There have been very few examples of folks that knew that this was the problem and were able to fix it. Probably a really good example is Netflix, where they built a company based on dealing with the post service. Mm-hmm. You know, mailing DVDs back and forth, with the understanding that we were only going to build an audience, and that at a certain point we were going to flip a switch and completely burn down this entire company that we've built and recreate it as with digital distribution over the internet. And the ability to change the organizational structure in that sense was a Herculean task, but it wasn't because there weren't, say, the software engineers and networking engineers that could build this new thing. It was just that all the people who had created the value were no longer going to have a seat at the table in the new world.
I think it's partially that, but I also think that what's an ROI for the future, right? So one of the other big problem is we deal with a lot of people who want to know some estimate of their return on investment if they make these changes. And when we're talking about things that are 5, 10 years in the future, there's no way to, in any meaningful way, to make a calculation, right? So there's no impetus to change when somebody can't tick off a box and show it to somebody within the organization for a blessing that they're, that they're not going to sink a bunch of investment funding in something.
Well, I think there's a sort of agency problem because people get stuck on the interfaces of their company. Mm-hmm. Like, every company has to decide what are they going to be responsible for themselves, what goes inside the company, and what goes outside, what's going to be outsourced. And once that decision gets made, you build up interfaces between the inside and the outside world. We're seeing a lot of companies that are doing this now by building software as your interface, where you have an API as the way that your company interfaces with the world. And one of the things that we're looking for is that folks that have business models where the people are below the API, where they're taking orders from the API, are not going to last. And their transitional companies are folks like Uber and Lyft, where you have a layer of software engineers at the top. They are building the API, and then you have the 1099s that are underneath. And the pressure to make the API just extend all the way down is so great that you can't rely on that as a business model for being very enduring. But this is not just a sort of sharing economy kind of thing. This is like radiology, for example. Radiologists, very highly paid medical profession, 10-year residency. They are now living under the API, where they're not in the hospital, they have no interaction with the patients. The EMR system just presents an image, gives them some suggestions, they click on boxes, type of the report, and it goes away. And so all of their discretion and judgment and the real value that they're putting to the process is gone. So I'm expecting that radiology is not going to be a profession because the downward pressure of living below the API will eventually make them redundant.
Right. Well, and Aireen, for AirAsia's perspective, being able to actually use the knowledge about where the pressure might be valuable for creating value for your company, where you should eliminate some things to allow that pressure to make you more efficient. How do you balance that? The idea of workforce, the pressures of the technology itself, yeah, and thinking about this issue of training, retraining.
Yes, I think our workforce is happy about digitalization because it eased their work a lot, because they're always saying, each department always say that they are short of manpower.
They're short of manpower.
Yeah, and we try to tell them that that's not probably the easiest way. I mean, that's probably the most convenient way to provide a solution for anything. So we force them to think of processes. We force them to look at various ways as opposed to just say we are just short of manpower. So when we embrace digitalization and we ask each heads of department to look into their areas and where they can adopt digitalization, where they can use digitalization as part of their day-to-day work, they really look into those because they see that it actually helps their day-to-day work. They see that it can actually also help increase their revenue base, especially for the commercial team and all that. And the fact that the internet conversion rate increased by more than 8% and our load factor has been on average above 90%, that just shows that it is working and that excites everybody. And then because of that we have to add in more frequencies and more routes in order to fulfill this demand, basically. And we have, like I mentioned just now, we have an innovation hub. We talk about it a lot. We have a culture team where part of the agenda is to talk about embracing technology and digitalization. So to them, they don't actually look at it as something of a burden. They see it as something that could help them with their day-to-day work.
Generating new things.
Because right now, I mean, we're growing so much. And it is quite a burden for them to be able to fulfill those needs and do their day-to-day operations and all that. And at the same time, on a quarterly basis, we have this hackathon across the region. So they are hackathon, yes. So we actually look at, we invite people in the region because, people are aware of AirAsia. They want to be part of the whole innovation initiative that we're doing. So we open it up to where we have our presence, and we do this regionally, and the employees are part of it to witness what kind of product that can be created. And I guess this kind of thing just helps evolve the mindset.
The culture
continuously
continues to change.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're down to the last 5 minutes. I warned all the panelists we have a minute and a half each to share at this point. What do you think is the most important thing you'd like this audience to take into these next sessions? Lori?
Start with me. I think part of it is how to lean into the change and figure out, it really does focus you on figuring out how you're going to differentiate and how you differentiate today and how you'll differentiate, in the future. It really, the strategy role fundamentally in some ways hasn't changed. The whole concept of where you're going to grow is the same work that's been happening forever in strategy. So, how much you're investing in your core business, how much you're investing in new businesses, those questions still remain. It really comes down to how. And as a strategy leader in a company, how do you inflect, and the other panelists sort of pushing on it, how do you inflect and change the how such that you make the organizational changes or change the model in which you're doing business or separate parts of your business to compete with your existing business. And really the role of strategy is now changing more to the how to accelerate the pace of change and the way that your organization moves with change, not just the what you end up investing in. I think that's the most exciting thing I think that's happening in strategy, at least from my perspective.
Excellent. Aireen?
Yeah, I think the strategy in the management is that, yes, we do want to expand horizontally, and that means that we are expanding by expanding our footprint in the markets in the region that we're based, but we also need exponential growth. In order for us to always be sustainable and competitive and always be ahead of the game. And that exponential growth will come in various forms in how we build our adjacency business. Because once we build it, we will be actually strengthening our core business as well. If we build our loyalty program, we build a visual TripAdvisor or a marketplace like Amazon or so, because we already have a community readily available where we can connect them even more and create that desire to travel even more, it will actually reinforces our core business. And I think that's quite important also to share that vision to the staff, to our manpower, to our staff, so that they can understand what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, great, thank you. Aireen?
One takeaway I would like to leave is that place matters, and it matters now more than ever. One of the paradoxes of the proliferation of the extrinsic distribution technologies like the internet is we lull ourselves into the belief that we can just decouple everything and place no longer really matters. So in the 90s, everyone was sure that the internet, the information superhighway, was going to allow everyone to telecommute, and it wouldn't really matter where you lived, where you worked, because you could just log onto your terminal and do everything you needed to do. I think the same thing was even more true with phones. It's probably why people are so enamored with virtual realities. I agree with you that augmented or mixed reality is really much more important. We believe that, well, people will just jack into virtual reality and place will no longer matter. But if you look at where all the value has actually been created, it's in systems that are built on top of those digital extrinsic technologies, but are linked to the place. So if you think of Postmates and Uber and Lyft and Tinder and all of these digital services that are linked to the GPS in your phone, that are linked to the place, that are linked to using digital technologies to augment the one-on-one human interactions, the service interactions that we have, then we all understand that in the future, the places are more important. Where these things happen is more important, and proximity to other innovators, proximity to other value creators is more important than it's ever been.
Excellent. Amy?
So I want to leave you with a horror story and hope for redemption. Because it's analogous to a challenge that everybody in this room faces. So the town that I grew up, which is just on the southeast side of Chicago, it's a small town, there are a lot of roads, and people drive like maniacs. And a big chunk of the city budget where I grew up comes from speeding tickets and the ecosystem that the court system provides. So now let's take a moment and think about the future of self-driving cars. One of the promises of self-driving vehicles is that they go at a standard pace. They go at a standard pace. Once those networks are connected, we won't have as many traffic problems. And if you start to connect those dots, the place that we wind up at is there's no need for police officers, right? There's no more need for traffic cops because our cars are no longer speeding. And once there's no need for traffic cops to issue tickets, there's no reason to have traffic courts and lawyers and judges or the companies that produce the electronic guns that track the speed. So, and if you spin out the scenario, as I have done, my whole town goes bankrupt. So that's a horror story. It's very sad for my town, but there is hope for redemption because it's the year 2017. And 2 weeks ago, I was at the National Academies of Science, where our government officials are having a very difficult time thinking through what the regulations and the structure should be. So we have time and we have knowledge. Now, where I grew up, there's a fairly famous engineering school. And there are some very, very smart companies that have an opportunity now to create the future infrastructure for vehicle-to-vehicle communications, for bioluminescence, for for LiDAR, right? So that town where I grew up has the opportunity to take advantage and to capitalize on what's coming if they make a decision to do that today. The flip side of that is do nothing and find that their property tax base, isn't enough to keep going once all of that additional revenue from parking tickets and speeding tickets isn't there anymore. This is analogous to the exact same challenge that you all face. And it's a matter of making a decision in the present to iterate intelligently so that you can reap all of the opportunities that are waiting for you just over the horizon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think this message of people and place matter is a very apt way to end this, this panel discussion. I thank each one of you for being with us and encourage each of you now that we go to the next sessions to take advantage of all of the people here and this very special place that we're in to have a conversation that allows you to bring back to your organizations new insights and new actions for the future. So thank you very much.